May we who are merely inconvenienced remember those whose lives are at stake. May we who have no risk factors remember the most vulnerable. May we who have the luxury of working from home remember those who must choose between preserving their health or making rent. May we who have the flexibility to care for our children when their schools close remember those who have no options. May we who have to cancel our trips remember those who have no place to go. May we who are losing our margin money in the tumult of the economic market remember those who have no margin at all. May we who settle in for quarantine at home remember those who have no. During this time, when we cannot physically wrap our arms around each other, let us yet find ways to be the loving embrace of God to our neighbors. Amen.
Amen.
That was great.
Amen.
It was great.
Yeah, that was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Any announcements?
Yes, there's several. Could everybody please mute their phones, please, or their microphone?
Ed?
Okay, so I'll begin. This weekend is the district assembly. It's on Zoom. If you are going to be an officer or director next year, you need to attend. So please look for the District 5280 email that came out so you can sign up. Okay, so Peter Moore has an announcement. Peter?
Hi, President Diane, past President and current President Diane. I was asked to say a few words about our past President, George Deere. He passed away late March, and George served as our president in the year 2000 to 2002 while we were meeting at the Bel Air Hotel. George was born in Hong Kong in 1941. He grew up in San Francisco, and he later worked at UC Berkeley. And then he transferred to UCLA to serve as assistant dean of the television, film, and theater school here. He was assistant dean. Gil Cates was the dean, but George did all the work academically and had tremendous interaction with the student. And he was instrumental in starting up the Rotaract Club at UCLA. So we had a Rotaract Club many years ago and it had fallen apart. George came in as the position of assistant dean, rounded up a lot of students and got it going. Many of you will remember that time. When George was president, he instituted several things to raise money. That was to think on your fellow members when there's something special so you can find them. But if you did a good deed, you will have a Deere dollar. So those were genuine currency of Deere dollar that you can exchange to pay your fine. During George's tenure, we had the 9/11 tragedy, and we shut the club meeting down for a week. During his year, he had his Japanese exchange student program. He relied upon his international service chair to organize activities for the visiting Japanese student. His international chair took off on vacation, and he found out that he didn't do anything to arrange for the Japanese student who was coming the following week. So he was in a scramble. He got the help of Ernie Wolf, who quickly put together a 3-day program for the Japanese student, and it ran very smoothly, and no one knew of the fiasco that led up to that event. So that's how we react. We come in and get together and pull it off. A very memorable project that George did was Aiden's Place, which is across from Diane's office. That was Aiden's Place. That was done during George's year, and it's a park with a lot of, it's a park for disabled young people, but it's also good for a lot of, for all children as well. Um, he promised the district governor to have a net gain of 7 members. And at his hump day, that was his wish to Santa. Santa came in on hump day and asked him, George, what would you like for your for Christmas? He says, I want 7 members net gain. So he got his 7th member at demotion by Eagle. If you remember Eagle a few weeks ago, played by Steve Day, he built his 7th Rotarian member of Westwood Village with body parts, assumably from UCLA inventory. George retired, and then he went back up to the Bay Area. He bought a home, went up to the Bay Area, and then he established a new Rotary Club of San Francisco Chinatown in 2008. And we have been in close contact with that club ever since. And that is the work of George Deere. Ron, would you like to fill in on some of this, please?
Peter, you did such a great job. I was going to tick off those wonderful things that George did and was responsible for, like the Rotaract Club and our continuing relationship with the San Francisco Chinatown Club, of which is in my background. There's a little picture from 2009, and George is there. If you could see him and Janice kind of in the middle of that picture. What can you say about a great man like George Deere? Just a wonderful man.
And I should also point out that his wife, Janice, was a 2-term president of the auxiliary.
Right.
And she did a lot, not only for the auxiliary, but also for our club. Thank you very much, President Diane.
Thank you, Peter. We appreciate all that information. Okay, so the YMCA, Collins Cats YMCA, has asked us to partner with some Rotaries in the area to do a food drive. So I'm talking to the president of Santa Monica and Culver City, and I will get back to you soon with how you can help participate. And then finally, Ruth Bay, as you know, he's trying to keep his restaurant open and all of his people employed. So if you're going to order out, I suggest you, or I encourage you to go to Ruth Bay's restaurant. And if you can't, you can always call and give a donation of $40 and they will deliver cupcakes to the UCLA hospital. So anything you can do to help him would also be appreciated. Other than that, happy birthday to Marcia and happy anniversary to Tom Barron. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ed?
Yes.
Steve Day. Just to remind those members of the club who are on the board of managers, stay on the Zoom. Once this meeting concludes, Bart Zazinski will join us around 1:30 for the board of managers meeting. So I remind just the names of the endowment committee or the board of managers plus our current past president, Diane. There's myself, Mark Rogo, Gordon Fell, Tom Barron, Dwight Heckler, Nancy McCready, Mike Newman, Diane Good, Terry White, and John O'Keefe. So I ask all of you who are on the call now just to stay on the call, and I offer an invitation to any other member who's interested in what goes on in a board of, or the board of managers meeting. You can stick around. You have an invitation to listen in if you're so interested. Thanks, Ed.
Nancy, can I just double check? Nancy, are you on your phone there at the 455 number?
Hi, it's my work number.
Okay, just
Hi,
check.
everyone. Happy
Hi,
birthday.
Nancy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, also, I want to say that I did spend about 16 years in the motion picture TV department at UCLA, so I got to know George very well. And it's a sad day to hear that. Also, can we go into what happened on May 14th in history.
I know what happened.
Well, good things happened. It was the 1607 first permanent English settlement in Georgetown. After that, we had the delegates met in 1787 to draw up the U.S. Constitution.
Looks like Ed's frozen.
Oh, I'm still on, right? Am I on?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, I don't know what to do about, he's gonna have to call back in, I guess. So, 1607, first permanent English settlement in Jonestown. Is everybody hearing me? Let me see.
Yes.
Yes, we're hearing you.
Okay. 1787, delegates gather in Philadelphia to draw up U.S. Constitution. He said if he got knocked off for me to just carry on. Okay. In 1796, Edward Jenner administers the first smallpox vaccination in 1796. I didn't know it was.
And I should have cut to the chase.
Oh.
54 years ago,
Yeah.
1966, Tom married his lovely wife, Margot. And so
Right.
we're celebrating 54 years. And Tom, we'd like you to donate $54 in that honor.
Well, everybody who's in favor of that, raise their hand. Uh-oh. Yeah. Thanks, Ron. That's a cheap price
Congratulations.
to pay, though. For
Congratulations, Tom. It was a great day for you, and definitely it was a great day for us in the club.
Margot has an exception to that. That's all right.
I have a question to Brian. When would our speaker be ready?
Oh, he should be getting on the line in the next, say, 5 minutes.
Okay, that's great.
We didn't get all of your things, Ed. We
Okay.
I think with
All right.
delegates gather in Philadelphia for the
Okay, we'll try. And after that, Edward Jenner's started the smallpox vaccination. Hopefully it didn't take a year to do it, but after that, we had the trip to the Pacific Northwest from Lewis and Clark, 1804. This is, it should be Patton, not Patton as in a name, for the condensed milk in 1853. The 11th Kentucky Derby was won by Babe Henderson, and he rode Joe Cotton, which was named after the bookie, the big bookie of the time. And one of the most important things for all of us, this date. And I also have two more questions. Also, which president signed the bill establishing a rocket test range at Cape Canaveral?
John F. Kennedy.
Which?
I vote for Johnson.
What do you think?
Repeat the question. And
Started Canaveral, Cape Canaveral. I think it was Kennedy.
Kennedy.
I think Ed got frozen again.
Ed's frozen.
I guess he'll come back on. This is our speaker for today. So, and we're still waiting for him to come on.
I'd like to add one more thing that took place on May 14th.
What's that?
67 years ago today, Lynn Marie Mirisch was born.
Oh, really?
Well, happy birthday to Lynn.
Another birthday girl.
Yeah.
Whoa.
That's why I was late. We had our grandchildren on Portal calling grandma to wish her a happy birthday.
Yeah.
How much is Mark going to contribute for that birthday?
That's Lynn. That's not me. That's Lynn.
But you always say she's your prize.
Isn't she an
Yeah, I do,
honorary
but
member?
I also always say, Michael, and she will tell you what's hers is hers and what's mine is also hers. I don't have any money.
That's
Mark,
community property,
she's also
right?
a member. She's a member.
Hey, Dwight. I have one more question if I don't get knocked off, and the winner of that will win this lovely t-shirt. I will send it over to you. It's from New Directions. And 54 years ago, the day that Tom was married, what song was #1 in the top Billboard 100?
Oh, boy.
Ooh.
4 years ago.
54 years old, the day that Tom was married.
Yellow Submarine.
No,
Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
no, that would have been the one I would have guessed, but no.
No idea.
Something by the Beatles.
That's what I thought, but no, this one actually think more local.
The Beach Boys. Something by the Beach
One
Boys.
of the favorite days for, I think, Gordon's favorite day
Gordon's favorite.
when he was working.
Gordon's favorite day.
Oh, 54 years ago.
Huh.
54 years ago. And Mamas and the Papas?
Monday, Monday.
Yes. You have a shirt going your way, Steve.
All right.
Mr. Reid is joining us. Brian, you want to, or Ed, you want to greet him?
Are you guys going to let Mark off that easy? I'm sorry to interrupt, but he went to all that work to find an excuse.
Reid, are you with us?
Hi, I am.
I tried, Mark.
Great.
Well, I would defer to Brian because I keep getting knocked off the internet.
All right. I'll go ahead and introduce Reid. Reid and I became friends as assistant scoutmasters of Troop 223. Our sons are both Eagle Scouts, and we're very proud of them. And Reid has had an interesting career. As an attorney, he did a lot of corporate law, mergers, acquisitions. He's a businessman. He has extensive real estate experience, and he currently owns a law firm, a personal injury law firm. So if you drive out to Mojave, you'll see Cusick Law billboards everywhere. So a very interesting guy, and very overqualified to become one of the early COVID patients here in Los Angeles. So I'll let Reid take over and talk about the worst vacation souvenir he ever had.
That's funny. Actually, it's not the worst vacation souvenir I ever had. I seem to get lucky. I also got the Zika virus in 2016, and that was worse. Yeah, it was an interesting trip. This is a trip that I go on with my friends and some of my clients. It's a boys' trip, and we do it every year. And this is my 4th year. And we go skiing in the Italian Alps or the Swiss Alps, sometimes the French Alps. And this was no different this year. We left on about February 20th from Los Angeles, flew into Munich, and then drove to the ski resort in northern Italy. And it's called Val Gardena. And very nice place, very nice little hotel. It's kind of like a family style hotel, very cozy. And we were all very happy. And about 2 days after we got there, we started dropping like flies. We started getting sick, and we just thought it was a normal, like a cold, maybe a flu. We started to hear that there was an outbreak of coronavirus in northern Italy, but that's Milan. That's like 250 miles away, and it didn't occur to us that people in Milan might go skiing. It's kind of a stupid thing not to figure out. We're not sure how we got it, but the group was 13 of us, 3 from Sweden, 9 from Southern California. I'm sorry, 10 from Southern California. And all 13 of us gradually got sick within a couple of days each other. Again, actually, I shouldn't say that. One didn't. There was an 81-year-old guy that didn't have any symptoms at all. Interestingly, after we got back and we found out that we had coronavirus, he was tested and he tested positive, but he never had any significant symptoms at all. So my symptoms were relatively mild. I had a high fever. I didn't have a thermometer, so I don't know the exact the number, but I was hot, sweating like crazy, and then the next minute I'd be freezing cold, shivering, and it would just kind of bounce back and forth like that. I had extreme fatigue. I didn't want to move. I was so weak I couldn't even pick up my phone. And then I had body aches, like I get sometimes when I overdo a workout. And I really thought that the body aches were from skiing. And in fact, what happened was the first day I skied, and it turned out the only day I skied, the weather was warm. And so the snow was kind of slushy. And I noticed that after like 2 hours of skiing, I was just exhausted. I was physically exhausted. And so I decided to just call it quit after half a day and made it back to the hotel. And by the time I got back to the hotel, I was so dragging and I was so tired. And in hindsight, I know what that was. That was the effects of COVID. And it was that night that the fever hit. And so that fever lasted about 3 days. It was uncomfortable, like a normal flu. And then it went away. I had, and I was still tired for maybe a day after that, and then it went away. My friends, some of them had some digestive tract issues, little diarrhea, stomach upset. A couple of them were 2 or 3 people were coughing, but not particularly bad. I think everybody except this guy Joe, who the 81-year-old who had no symptoms, I think everybody got a fever of varying degrees, and they came out of it except for 2 of my friends, and they were okay, but they were progressively getting worse. So on the 29th, we all drove back to Munich, and the plan was we stay one night in Munich, and then we fly out of Munich airport the next morning to, most people were going home or whatever their next destination was. But when we drove back, my one friend, Peter, he just really didn't look good. And I think he's about 64, and he just was not looking good. And it was to the point where we decided, we're taking him to the hospital. So we took him to the nearest hospital in Munich, which just so happens to be a world-renowned pulmonary specialist hospital. And I think without that, he may not have survived. So they took him in. We asked him, we said, hey, do you think you should get a COVID test? And they said no. And I'm disappointed in that, because I think they said no because they didn't want a positive test. At that point, Germany didn't have any cases. And I think they were concerned about the negative publicity of having to report that there was a COVID case in Munich. At that point, they were starting to shut things down in Italy. It was getting much worse over there. We had no idea how bad it was going to get. So they didn't give him the COVID test, but they said he had double pneumonia. And so, all right, so the next day, everybody got on their planes and left, except for a couple of my friends actually delayed their flight by a day just to make sure Peter was set. And it was the next day, while everybody was in transit to coming back home or what have you, or their next destination, they finally gave Peter the COVID test and he tested positive. Now, when that happened, my friends who were still there, they came back to the United States, they notified everybody, and I'm not sure if it was my friends that notified the health department or the hospital in Germany notified the LA County Department of Public Health. But when I landed, I had a message from the LA County Department of Public Health on my phone, and they said, hey, give us a call. And I called the guy up and explained the situation. He had some information, and he says, you need to self-quarantine. And I said, that's fine, I'm gonna do that. And I had no symptoms at this point. And so he said, it was very interesting because he said, how are you going to where are you going to quarantine? And, I there's this little condo that I have access to in West Hollywood. I said, that's where I'm going to go. He says, how are you going to get there? And I said, well, I was going to take an Uber. And he said, okay, that's fine, but we need to have the name of the Uber driver. And so I'm thinking, they're going to call this guy and make him quarantine. And I don't want to do that to them. And they said, well, I don't want to do that. And so I said, what about if I take a taxi? They said the same thing. And I said, okay, I'll rent a car. And they said, how are you going to get to the car rental place? And, there's a bus that takes you to the car rental place. And there's a person behind the car rental counter. And I mean, it was very interesting to try and figure out a way to get to my place of quarantine without having any human contact. So finally, in the end, I waited at the airport for about 3 hours and finally had my car picked up and delivered to me at the airport. And then the person who delivered it waved at me, got out of the car and left. And she took an Uber back wherever she was going. And I then walked up to my car, put my stuff in there and drove myself to my place of quarantine, where I religiously stayed in the unit until I tested negative. The LA County Department of Public Health was fabulous. They were really helpful. They checked on me twice a day, every day. They directed me to come into the Department of Public Health to their facility to get tested. The first test I did was March 5th. Again, I drove up right in front of the door to their facility and I parked illegally at their request. And they had a path that they set up for me. Everybody was in masks and everything and a whole get up. And they had instructed me, you're gonna walk right through the middle, through the doors, don't touch anything, right into the facility. And they were all guiding me in. And then I don't know if any of you have been tested, but it is really an unpleasant test. So they guided me into the room and they took it's like a foot-long Q-tip. And the first one they put in my nose and my rear end was tickling when they put it so far down. And then the second one, they put it in my mouth. And again, I was like trying not to throw up. Very unpleasant, but 2 different swabs they tested, they were both positive. So then I went back to my quarantine place. I took great advantage of Postmates. I had food delivered where in a way where there was no contact. They would leave it at the door and then I'd come out. Then my symptoms ended March 6th, actually. And then I got retested March 11th, 2 tests on March 11th, and they both came back negative. Since then, apparently my blood plasma has antibodies in it, and I've donated my plasma twice, and they're able to use that to help somebody out. That's actually been a really wonderful experience. I got thank you letters from some guy's grandchildren, and that was very meaningful. That's my particular story. Now, as far as it wasn't so bad. As far as my friends, so out of the 13 of us, 9 had either mild symptoms or the one guy had no symptoms, and we all recovered and we all had no medical treatment. One guy when he came back from Europe, he went into the hospital in Tarzana, and he was there for about 3 weeks. He was never on a ventilator. The hospital actually wanted to send him home, but his mother was having a fit and would not let the hospital send him home. And he fully recovered and he was fine. It's my other 3 friends. They really had a tough time. So one of the Swedes went home. He got much worse after he got home. He started coughing up blood. He went to the hospital. Within a very short period of time, he was in a medically induced coma, but not for too long. He was in the coma for maybe between 10 days and 2 weeks. And that doesn't sound like a long time when you hear about my other friend. So and then he came out of it. They actually gave him AIDS medication. They gave him the antiviral cocktail that people with HIV take to reduce their viral load to, undetectable or whatever it is. And I know that they had tried that. I don't know what else they did for him, but he finally turned around. He made a full recovery. He did have to have some kind of rehab. The next guy is, he's been in the news recently, Greg. So Greg was in the hospital for 60 days and he was on a ventilator. He was he had double pneumonia and he was put on a ventilator very quickly. He was put into a medically induced coma for, I think it was, how many weeks? It was probably about six weeks. And, but he was on the ventilator for 31 days and he had a real problem and I'm just really sad for him. So this is a very healthy guy. He loves skiing. He's got a place in Mammoth. He's very athletic, but he was a bit overweight, I will say. And he had high blood pressure. His blood pressure crashed while he was on the ventilator. And it's an adverse effect of the ventilator. And so they had to give him medicine to raise his blood pressure. And the effect of that medicine, I'm told, is to cause the blood to concentrate in the core of the body and keep the vital organs oxygenated. But it greatly decreases or cuts off the circulation to the extremities. So the doctors apparently actually gave him a 1% chance of surviving. And thank God he did survive. And he just got out of the hospital, I think this week. But sadly, because of the decreased circulation, he's going to lose all of his fingers. They turned black. And actually, when I talked to him on FaceTime, after he woke up, he showed me his fingers. I thought they were literally black. And I thought it was just some kind of, I had heard that he was having pain in his fingers and I thought it was peripheral neuropathy, which is bad enough. And I figured, oh, they put iodine or some kind of a ointment, but no, his fingers are literally black like my shirt. So he's probably going to lose all those fingers. That was a really sad and unfortunate event for him. And then my last friend, Peter. So Peter is the one that looked really bad on February 29th. We took him to the hospital. He tested positive the next day. And then the day after that, they put him he was coughing so violently that he couldn't sleep, he couldn't heal. And that's why they put the people into a medically induced coma. So he was put into a medically induced coma on maybe March, I want to say 2nd or 3rd. And none of us have heard from him since. And sadly his wife, he's getting a divorce and his wife is, under German law, the only person that the doctors can talk to, and his wife is just cutting everybody off. So we're not sure what's happening. We've gotten some snippets of information. He was in a coma for about 8 weeks. I'm sorry. Yeah, is that right? 8 weeks.
Oh.
we understand that he's expected to survive. We understand that he has no adverse effects, you know, circulation problems or anything like that. But when you're in a coma for that long, you know, you have muscle atrophy, you have problems. So my understanding is that he is now conscious, he's awake. He will make a full recovery, and he either has been moved to a rehab facility or is going to be moved to a rehab facility where he will have to learn to walk and learn to, you know, get his muscles in shape to just carry himself, and then hopefully soon be able to come back to the United States. We're very anxious about him because all of his friends here, you know, we want to talk to him, we want to see him. I offered to go back to Germany and get him. Many of his friends have offered to do that, and it remains to be seen what will happen with our dear friend. So I guess this serves to, this is a segue into what's happening now. And it's very interesting because, you know, we have these safe at home orders, and I've had a lot of intellectual debates about these orders, especially as a person who's had some experience with the disease itself, although not serious, thank God. I think it's generally agreed that the safe at home orders are illegal. They're unconstitutional, and they violate, you know, all kinds of provisions of both the state and the United States Constitution, but they're necessary. And my firm has actually been asked to represent some businesses in suing the state of California over these orders. And at the time I declined. I may change my mind if this continues to go too long. But while I think it's terrible to ever abridge the rights guaranteed by the United States Constitution, and it's a very dangerous precedent, because, you know, if you allow the slightest modification of the Constitution, then in time you will have a lot of very slight modifications that as a whole will totally change that Constitution. So I'm very mindful of it, but, you know, it's a very interesting debate. I was in favor of the lockdown, and I'm glad we did it, because I think that California would have gone the route of Italy. I think we would have been absolutely devastated if we didn't do it. But it's important to recognize that it's a constitutional violation. And I think that people should voluntarily follow the safe at home guidelines, not laws. They are not laws. Only the legislature can pass a law. And, you know, I find it, you know, I'm watching with great interest to see what the state will do and what our LA city mayor is going to do about reopening our city and our state and getting the economy started again. But I think that there's a lot of people that are on the side of, hey, open up right now, this is ridiculous. There's only been, you know, less than 2,000 deaths out of 10 million population in the county of Los Angeles. That shouldn't shut down the whole county. And then there's people on the other side of it that say, are you guys nuts? You know, the reason why we've had so few deaths is because of the lockdown, and, you know, saving lives is much more important than saving jobs and the economy and anything having to do with money. There is a spectrum, and I think there's a balance. And I do hope that we can open soon in a way that balances the risk of COVID versus the risk and damage to our economy, to our financial lives. You know, I see people suffering tremendously because of this shutdown, and I feel really bad for them. And but I have personally witnessed why this is happening, and that's why I supported the lockdown. Anybody? I guess that's all I'd say. Anybody have any questions?
you have a question, Joe?
Hey, I have a question. What did they do with the people on the plane? Did they make the people on the plane quarantine?
Remember when the people got on their planes on March 1st, the German hospital had not tested for COVID yet. At that point, Peter was the only person that had been seen by a doctor, and they had said he has double pneumonia. So no, none of the people were I don't think they were wearing masks. I don't think they were doing anything. I think they thought they didn't realize that it was COVID yet.
But once they realized that you had COVID, didn't they want to contact the people who flew back with you on the plane?
I have no idea what the LA County Department of Public Health did, but they asked us all for how did you get back? What was your flight number? So they may have contacted the airlines, and
okay.
I would be surprised if they didn't. I would think they would have used their government power to contact the airlines and either direct or suggest that the airlines contact all of the people on the plane to monitor them for any kind of symptoms and maybe get tested.
Thank you.
I have a question about the legality of the lockdown.
Okay.
Let's assume that the COVID was even a lot worse than it apparently is in terms of its ability to be infectious. Is there any legal authority that could declare martial law and control the lockdown that way?
The governor has the right to declare martial law, but the governor does not have the right to quarantine healthy people. And the constitutional analysis, you can infringe, and this is not my area of law, so I'm kind of winging it here, but just based on what I've been reading in my recent discussions. But the government can infringe constitutional rights when it's necessary. It's called a legitimate state interest, but it's a very strict scrutiny standard. And a court reviewing a law or an infringement of constitutional rights. I just heard somebody say, I hear you. I hear you. Can anybody hear me? Should I continue?
Yeah, we can all
hear you. Okay. So what a court does is they will look at the burden imposed by the law, and they will look at what is the legitimate state interest. And the legitimate state interest in this case is protection of the public health, preventing deaths. That's obviously a very good interest. But then the Constitution requires that the remedy for that legitimate state interest must be narrowly tailored to accomplish that goal and not go any further than that. Okay, so that narrow tailoring is very important. So in our case, of course, the government is permitted to quarantine a person who has been determined to have been infected or who could pose a public risk. But what the government has done is said everybody is quarantined. That's not narrowly tailoring this. The government hasn't made any exemptions. So for example, I should be exempt because I'm immune. I'm so immune that the doctors are, taking my blood plasma every 28 days to treat other people because I have antibodies. So of course, telling me to stay at home, telling me to stay away from the beach, restricting my travel, these are all constitutional rights that I have, and they're being totally impaired for no legitimate state interest. I don't mind because I understand the need for it, because practically speaking, you can expect people to lie. So if the police are trying to enforce an order that says you must stay at home unless you've had it and recovered, everybody will say, yeah, I had it and recovered, right? Or some people will say, yeah, I had it and recovered. So they've made this blanket rule, but I don't think that would pass constitutional scrutiny.
Well, can I follow up with another question?
Yeah.
I can I can conceive of a possibility where time could truly be of the essence, where you have a virus that, let's say, is far more infectious like measles and far more lethal like Ebola. And if you didn't get a handle on it immediately, you're talking about maybe 2/3 or 3/4 of the population dying.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think if they did that, if that type of event happened, I think they'd do exactly what they're doing now, only more so. And, you know, people would have to accept it. But people also have to acknowledge it is a violation of the Constitution, just like I did. I mean, I recognize that it's a violation, and I recognize that it's a necessary violation, and I don't like it, but I accept it, and I accept the need for it. It's a scary thing when you start infringing on constitutional rights without even acknowledging it. I mean, I would have loved for the governor to say, to come out publicly and acknowledge, I'm putting this order in place. I recognize that that impinges on constitutional rights, but it's necessary, and sometimes that is necessary. And I'm going to tailor this to be the minimum infringement and impairment on constitutional rights necessary in order to protect the public. I would have appreciated that transparency and that honesty. But the fact that he didn't do it is, to me, it's troubling, but the end result is more important. And I think those orders have saved a lot of lives.
I mean, can I say, I want to make a statement here. There's been a number of people, especially in South Korea, where they've been they've come down with COVID again after they had it the first time.
Yeah.
And so you're not necessarily, and there's no scientific standard of how much antibodies you need not to get it again. How long it lasts? It could be 2 weeks, it could be a month, it could be 3 months. They don't know. So even though you've had it, you may not be safe.
Well, from what I've read, and I understand that there is a debate about that, and that's one of the problems. The medical community does not know enough about COVID to make definitive statements. But from what I've read, particularly with the folks, I think it was in Korea, that tested positive after testing negative, there's some question about whether the negative test, and it was less than 2% of COVID patients retested positive. And so it was a question of whether the negative test was a false negative, number one. But number two, they said in all cases, the people who tested positive had no symptoms and were not infectious. So I don't, and again, that's anecdotal. The medical community has not had the time to do proper clinical trials and testing to prove out the various hypotheses that they've been making. But I've been feeling pretty confident that I'm not going to get it again and that I'm immune. And I guess the doctors are confident enough that they want my plasma every 28 days. But of course, when they do, I have to go through a whole interview every time I donate plasma. They ask, have you had any symptoms? And they do a test. I'm not sure what the test is. It might be an antibody. They prick my finger and take some blood. But yeah, I mean, that is definitely a question. And so when, I'm still being pretty safe. I'm washing my hands constantly, just like any other person should. And I'm not gathering with other people. I'm being reasonably socially distant, I guess. But, none of my family has gotten it. And when I'm home, I've got 7 kids living in my, let me see, wait, no, there's 7 of us. So 4, 6, I have 6 kids in my house because my 4 children and 2 of their friends are quarantining in my house. My son's roommate, dorm mate at college had nowhere to go, so he's there. And you know, I'm making sure that they are being careful and they're following the safe at home rules, and we're all washing hands and being careful.
I'm wondering, where do you think where did your whole group get exposed to the virus? Where do you suppose?
Well, we've been thinking a lot about that. I mean, obviously, we believe we got it while we were in Italy. My thought is that our group probably got it the first day of skiing, when they were in a gondola, because you know those gondolas are tightly packed. You have, you know, maybe 15 or 20 people in a gondola, which is enclosed, going up the mountain. The thing is, it's a very short exposure time, but it could be 5 to 10 minutes. And if that was enough to give one or more of our group an exposure and get it started, and then that person gave it to the rest of us when we were at dinner at the hotel, it was a very, very fast incubation period, because we were all sick within 2 days of arriving in Italy. And there was no reported cases from the hotel where we were in Munich. So yeah, we think, now I called the hotel, of course, after we found out, and I told them about what happened. And I followed up with the hotel and I asked them, are you guys okay? Because the hotel, we're very friendly with the staff at the hotel, and the general manager of the hotel is this unbelievably sweet Italian lady, and she's elderly, and I was, you know, we were very concerned about her. We would not want her to get it. And so I spoke with her, and this was after, and she said she was fine and nobody in the hotel got it except us. I'm not sure I believe that, because of course she has a vested interest in not letting people know that anybody at that hotel got it, but she was fine. She was on the phone, she was working.
Hey, Reid, I had a question. I've been following your friend Greg for a while. I have a friend that grew up with him. And just a remark about his case, we followed the statistics. We're always reading the statistics. And if you follow Greg's case, we tend to think that if you don't die and you recover, that's a success. But I mean, Greg is severely, has major medical problems going forward. So I just think that's interesting to point out. And his case, he doesn't fit the profile of the type of person that would get hit really hard by this. And recently I'm reading more about ACE inhibitors, which his blood pressure medication would have been. Has there been talk about that may have contributed to the severity of his case?
This is the first I've heard of that, and we're all wondering. But it seems to be totally random. We've got an 81-year-old guy who had like pretty much no symptoms. And then we have Greg, who's very athletic and healthy person, get totally wrecked. And Peter, I don't think Peter's on no medication as far as I know. But he did have he had scar tissue in his lung. He had one of his lungs had been removed like 20 years ago, and he had scar tissue in his lungs. So that probably contributed to his problem. So it seems, from what I've read of other people, it seems kind of random. They just don't know why some people respond totally differently than others.
Reid,
no,
let me ask you a question. Where do we go from here? And let me preface it by saying, if you were Eric Spaghetti or Gavin Gruesome, what would you do? Because if this thing lasts another month or 2 or 3, we will have no economy left, and the country will be in shambles. What would you do now?
You know, I would, first of all, I don't have the information available that they have, But based on my own thoughts and reading, I would reopen the economy. I would have people start coming back to work in a phased manner, but faster than they're doing it now. I understand that Garcetti, I don't know if it's.
Oh, did he freeze?
Yep.
Looks
Oh my
like
God.
he froze.
Well, I wonder, Brian, can you call him and just tell him to log back in? Anybody here? Oh, am I on mute?
Yeah, I'm calling.
Okay.
There he is over here.
Sorry about that. Even I got knocked off once today trying to do everything.
I got knocked off 10 times today.
Oh my gosh.
Is he back on?
Oh, he's.
There's a picture of
My picture doesn't look like
Is he old? He doesn't look old to me.
He's in his probably mid-50s, I'm guessing. Okay, he got voicemail.
He came out on voicemail or what? Oh, somebody was trying to come back on and I allowed them in, but they.
That's
just...
me from First Republic. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah. Hi.
Hi, Marcia.
Hi, Bart.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Just finishing up our regular meeting. So
Yeah,
we lost our speaker momentarily.
Oh, don't mean to interrupt you. I'll just observe.
Room very long?
You missed a great program.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You in the waiting room very long?
No, I just came in.
Oh, okay. All right, and someone.
While we're waiting, I want to thank everyone for coming today. And I want to thank Marcia for keeping it together from Oklahoma.
Arkansas.
Arkansas.
Oh, Arkansas. Okay.
All the same.
Two different worlds. Two different worlds. Yeah.
I would think. And I want to thank Tom for lasting that long. Congratulations, Tom.
And don't forget for the people that need to stay on for the financial meeting.
Yes, I know, but I just wanted to think, because I didn't know if this is going to be the 11th time I got knocked off. So.
Okay. Thanking it. Oh, there, I think we have him back. Oh, no, we don't. No.
Maybe he gave up.
Maybe he. Well, sorry about that. Where does he live? Does he live in Los Angeles? Oh, he said West Hollywood, didn't he?
Yes. Brian's off too. Oh,
Yeah.
Brian.
Okay.
It's a really good program. Put everything
Yeah.
right on track.
Really interesting. And also there, if he comes back, there's two questions in the chat room, one from Adele and one from Allie. So if he comes back, maybe we can ask those questions. Allie wants, or Brian, if you talk to him, Allie wants to know where he donates the plasma that he gives, where that gets donated to. And Adele would like to know what remaining symptoms he has after all this. I'm looking, oh, wait, maybe this is him. This is him, he's coming back. Reid, do you hear us? Reid, are you there?
There he is.
Oh, there he is. Hi, Reid, sorry about
Hi.
that.
I don't know what happened.
It happens to a few of us, you know, we'll just get knocked off and then we just sign back in.
Oh, okay. So
yeah.
I was going to respond to the gentleman's question about where would you go from here, and I was saying I certainly don't have the information that's available to Garcetti and Gruesome, but and I love that name for Gruesome, but to me I think it's very important to reopen the economy, and we got past the peak, which was April 26th, and the purpose of the stay-at-home orders, my understanding, was to flatten the curve and make sure that our medical system can handle the patients that need care. Also, we're in a much better place now than we were at the beginning of March. Doctors know much more about how to treat COVID. They don't know enough, but they know much more. And I think they'll do a much better job. Like if, for example, if knowing what the doctors know now, if Greg would have gone into the hospital on April 15th instead of March 5th or so, I don't think he would have lost his fingers. I think they would have been able to. There's a different type of respirator that they can give him. It's rare. They only have 200 in the entire country of the United States, but they could have done it. They could have done that. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's very important to open the economy, and with the very limited information that I have now, I would want to see the economy start opening on June 1st, and I would give people the choice. You know, employees can choose to go to work, wear masks for a while, although wearing cloth masks apparently does nothing. People have to have the proper masks that actually are sufficient to filter out the virus. But yeah, I would definitely like to see the economy reopen, and I think that if it goes beyond June 1st or maybe June 15th, I think there's going to be some legal challenges, and I think the court will invalidate it. I think the Supreme Court of Wisconsin just invalidated their safe-at-home orders. And they're looking at the same Constitution that our courts would look at, right? The United States Constitution. Anybody else have questions?
Yeah, I just have another comment. This is not the Constitution, but the Declaration of Independence. And the list of unalienable rights starts with life and is followed by liberty.
Yeah, although it doesn't necessarily mean that life, you know, that they're not like an ingredients list on a food label. But it might be that they are all equally important. But the question is the safer at home orders narrowly tailored to protect life? If the state interest is to protect life, the orders that they make or the laws that they pass to achieve that compelling, legitimate state interest have to be narrowly tailored to meet that interest with as little constitutional infringement as possible. And it's an interesting debate. I can't wait to read the opinion of the Supreme Court, of the Wisconsin Supreme Court, and see what their rationale was. It's going to be very interesting reading.
Reid, can I ask where you're donating plasma?
UCLA Blood and Plasma Center and American Red Cross.
Is that a one-to-one person thing, or can your plasma be used for more than one patient, for one donation, that is?
Well, the first time I went, it was early on. And what it was is that there was a 85-year-old man who was in critical condition, and he was just crashing. And his son is a blood doctor. He's a hematologist. His son happened to be friends, very good friends with one of my friends, and was, you know, very distraught. And my friend said, "Oh my God, I feel for you. My friend just, you know, recovered from coronavirus. It was an amazing story." And that's how the blood doctor found out about me. And so he asked if he could talk to me. He called me up and he said, "Look, there's this new thing, convalescent plasma therapy. You know, would you be willing to donate?" And I was like, I was ready to drop what I was doing and drive there right that minute. And he said, "Come tomorrow morning." And I did. And it was, I get emotional when I think about it. It was a wonderful experience. I mean, that's not fun. I'm afraid of needles, but it took, you know, I was connected to a machine for an hour, and, you know, it is what it is. All of that was a direct donation to that one man. And he improved immediately and he recovered. And I got notes from his grandchildren.
So, Reid, thank you so much. This has been fabulous, but we do need to wrap up. We have another meeting waiting. And so any additional questions, maybe Brian can get the answers for and fill us in next week.
Hi.
Thank you. Thank you, Reid, so much. Reid, we're going to make a donation in your name to the End Polio Now campaign that Rotary Foundation sponsors.
Cool.
So thank
Well,
you
that's
for
very
your
nice.
time.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, I ask all the Board of Managers, Diane, Nancy, Terry, Ryan, Whitney, if you could stay on too, that'd be great. Anyone else who's interested in listening in, you're more than welcome. So let me just take a minute to wait for,
Okay, I'm gonna, should I stop recording now? I guess so.
yeah, go ahead, yes.